Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of the BrandMe Spotlight podcast. And today I have with me Stuart Henry, who is the founder of A Better Version. And over the last 30 years, he's worked with a wide range of professional organizations to help them develop sustainable, high-performing teams. After 20 plus years in the corporate world in roles covering sales, marketing, and business development, his career path evolved to focus more on areas that really motivate him. So, culture, direction, change, and growth. His aim is to show how simple yet subtle changes can radically impact team dynamics and how individual behaviour is at the heart of developing truly successful teams. So, welcome, Stuart. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Dion. Nice to be here.
So, as I usually do with these podcasts, it's helping people to get an understanding of who you are as a person, as well as your journey as an entrepreneur and starting your business and growing your business. So, starting with your own personal journey, I know you were born in Ireland, so tell me what it was like growing up there.
It's one of those things, when you look back on how was it like, what was it like growing up in X? X was wherever it may be. So at the time, it was just normality. I grew up at a time, I'm clearly much, much older than you, but I
Not
grew up
that
at
much.
a time where it certainly in the north of Ireland, things were a little bit excitable, and we were in the midst of what was called the Troubles, and it was it was an interesting time to look back on. It was pretty desperate in many respects. Excuse me. A lot of the behaviors of people just absolutely reprehensible. So I was lucky that I wasn't really impacted directly by the Troubles. I had a few pals had issues, with sadly people being shot or injured in bombings and whatever else. But it felt normal, it's sort of because that's what I'd grown up with. So
Yeah.
when I go back, or when I was going back in the sort of early 90s, and I'd been away for a while, and you'd see the police and the soldiers with guns and patrols. It felt a bit strange, to be frank, having got out of it. But look, it's a great country. It's an absolutely spectacular place to go. So if I do nothing else, I can advocate people going for a little visit. And they serve very good Guinness.
Yeah, it's definitely on my bucket list of places that I need to go, which I haven't got to yet. So I'll definitely be going there. Not a huge fan of Guinness, although we have a drink in our culture called Guinness Punch, which we mix with another drink called Nutriment, which tastes very nice, and condensed milk, I might add, which is just part of a staple West Indian diet, condensed milk. So how long have you been out of Ireland? How long have you been in England?
So
Like,
despite
bonus question.
despite the accent, I've now lived over here 40 years. So I moved over when I was 18. So I've lived in England more than double the amount of time I lived in Ireland.
Wow.
But apparently, if you listen very carefully, there's still a hint of an accent.
Definitely. Very nice accent, I might add. And when you think about when you were growing up, what had the biggest impact on you?
Look, I think ultimately I was about 10 or 11, and I was shipped off to boarding school. And I'm told it was something I welcomed, and I wouldn't disagree with that, actually. Um, I was lucky in that I was pretty good at sport. And in an all boys boarding school, if you're good at sport, you survive. And you're sort of going to an all boys boarding school, you're thrown into the lion's den, and you either get eaten or you stand up. And because I was pretty good at a lot of different sports, I was able to stand up. And one of the things, the biggest impact, I think, is the important bit of the question. I sort of, to an extent, I lost parental influence at that age. You know, my dad was working out in the Middle East, and you know, we would speak frequently, but I didn't see him very often. And you know, mum was back home in Belfast and living her life. So I was. It sounds melodramatic and it sounds self-pitying. It's not the way I intended. I was sort of abandoned at that age, I really reveled. I could have sort of fallen apart, but it meant I was sort of able to try lots of different things. You know, some of my behavior in my teens, my God, you know, you look back, you know, Stu, don't tell stories about it. You know, I wasn't a very pleasant fella a lot of the time, but you're experimenting in those teenage years, and that's where you end up. Late teens, your personality is pretty much fixed, but you know, the ability to try different things out, I guess, without influence, without being told what to do, ended up sort of, you know, I would argue I am a blend of my mother and father, invariably, inevitably, but I grew a different personality because I was able to do it in isolation. That was the biggest impact for me, I think.
Yeah, I understand that. Although I didn't go to boarding school, but just I guess kind of having that, you know, my parents always worked a lot. My mum had multiple roles, and you know, you kind of had to learn that level of independence and thinking for yourself. Which
you know, it sort of I reveled in it. You know, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I look back, and you know, when I look at myself today as a 58-year-old, you know, yeah, there are bits of my dad, yes, there are bits of my mum, but actually, I am very much an individual. You know, when compared to the two of them, my dad's now dead, but you know, a lovely big fella, but frankly, if honestly, you know, desperately kind man, but actually probably quite weak. You know, until really pushed. He avoided conflict like the plague. Whereas my mum, I think, you know, without being too fine a point on it, if you look back, if she looks back, I think she would agree she was reasonably volatile and quite fiery in terms of her temperament. And I've certainly, you know, I've certainly got a little bit of that, the odd little flash of, let's say impatience, to be kind to me. But I'm still learning to cope with it.
Yeah, as we all are. I'm not the most patient person myself, to be honest. So thinking about you know, your expertise and your skills, what would you say are the most important skills that you've had to learn since starting your business?
That's quite a tough question, you know, because I've been playing with the idea of setting up a leadership business for 15 years, probably before I did it. And I was going to do it with some rugby pals, some people I know from the rugby world, and most people would know them. I'm not going to name them because it would be embarrassing and you know, conceited on my part. But I know a lot of the ex-international rugby players, particularly the English side from 2003. And when I started talking to them about setting up a leadership business, they couldn't see any correlation between their expertise and experience in sport and transitioning that into business. So one of the things I've had to learn is, you know, I suppose, is to help people become more aware of their own inherent abilities and allowing them to transition those into something that they can use in a business context. So one of the things we talk about at a better version is, you know, business is a team sport.
Yeah.
We build better teams. So when you put it in that context, people from a sporting environment can then go, okay, so it's like a team. Yeah. So then you can talk about roles and responsibilities and communication and goal setting and, you know, resilience and self-discipline and all those things. But in terms of the skills that I've learned, I don't know as much I've learned skills, Dion. I think the one thing I've become massively aware of is, despite having been sales and marketing director of Orange for several years, I'm actually a pretty lousy salesman in terms of the distinction between hunting and farming. Hunting, going out and finding new business, farming, building relationships. I'm a lousy hunter. absolutely lousy hunter, particularly when it comes to selling me. So
Yeah.
the skill I have learned, I suppose, is recognizing and accepting my own limitations and finding people to fill those gaps. That's probably the biggest thing I've learned. And funnily enough, I have got a number of ex-international rugby players coming to join the business because they're very good at hunting.
Mm.
And I hope that I can help them learn how to be good sort of I hate the word coach. I don't like the word coaching in business for some reason. But good sounding boards, good mentors that can transition their skills into helping businesses move forward. So yeah, that's sort of it.
Okay, and it's interesting. Obviously, we got to know each other through sort of me supporting you with your personal brand and you supporting me with my business as well. And I know that, being able to be that person who's able to sell themselves is one of the reasons why, personal branding for me is so important, because it's part of that whole skill set of, what is it about me that people are going to be attracted to? And it's not an easy skill set to learn.
No, 100%. It's no matter how good other people tell me I am, which doesn't happen very often, obviously, but when people pay me compliments, I sort of gloss over it, and really good friends of mine sort of take the mickey out of me because I just don't take compliments very well. Because I assume that this is me, this is what I do, and if I do it, therefore it must be pretty safe. Must be pretty simple, pretty easy because I'm not exceptional in any way.
Mm.
So look, I maybe have to be honest and be a bit more aware that there are times I say things that are quite smart, and it's learning to accept that maybe sometimes I do have a fairly positive contribution to make, and just get over my, I was once accused of false modesty, and I remember it vividly. This is at boarding school. I was about 14, and I'd won lots of events. And we were doing our sort of end of year report, and the teacher was saying, "So what have you achieved this year, Henry?" And I went, "Oh, well, just a few like bits and pieces. I didn't want to start reeling off all these things I'd achieved and won and whatever else." And he said, "Get over your false modesty." And I thought, "You arrogant hound," because it wasn't false. It doesn't really resonate.
Yeah.
But there you go. I also have the skill I have learned not to deal with is over talking. Sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. It's all good stuff, and it's stuff that a lot of people resonate with. So thank you for sharing that. Can you share a specific project or accomplishment that you are particularly proud of and why?
In terms of a better version, I would suggest that the thing I'm most proud of is the fact that we've been going 6 years. I didn't give up on the project. It's something I've always wanted to do. I say always. When I was in my early 20s, people were saying you should run a leadership business, and I remember at the time saying, I want a bit more credibility before I do it. I want to have achieved something. And for some reason, I used to say I'll do it when I'm 49. I don't know why that number sprung to mind. And I was behind the curve. I started it when I was 52, I think. But the fact that it's kept going, and I've been lucky enough to have been supported by a number of really good pals, one of whom is in the recruitment industry. And he's facilitated quite a few really massively beneficial client introductions that have helped me keep the business moving. But in terms of keeping the business going, that's been a necessity as much as anything. But I've loved it. I love the ability to pick and choose who I work with, and to an extent when I work. There's a great freedom to it, which suits me tremendously. I sort of joked a few weeks ago. I don't know. I think we might have had a couple of pints of Guinness, and we were talking to generally as a gang of people about epitaphs and what would you have in your tombstone, and I said, candidly, I think mine probably ought to say, he probably could have tried a bit harder.
Oh,
And that would be it. But no, but it's true. I'm not. It's not. I don't find it sad. It's just a general admission that I could put a lot more effort in. I just for whatever reason I sort of I like my freedom. Maybe that's what it's down to. But in terms of project, and that I'm really pleased with, although it's now going south. I work with a big engineering business that were like massively successful entirely in spite of themselves, completely directionless, rudderless, badly led, a whole series of things that really the brand and their history sustained them. And I managed to engage with from the chief exec down through the board, then cascading down throughout the organization to change the way the organization behaved, to give it a sense of direction, a sense of purpose, helping each individual in the organization understand the part that they've played or that they need to play in achieving the success. I love giving people that clarity, helping people see what's in front of them. And it's not, I know this is a very long answer, by the way, but it's not that people don't have the ability to see what's in front of them. They don't necessarily have the capacity. The thing that I've got that very few people have is time. The organizations I work with, everybody's getting 50, 100, 150, 200 emails a day. They're attending 3 meetings, preparing for 4 meetings, reading 3 reports, writing 2. People don't have time to breathe anymore. The pace of change is quite staggering. What I'm able to do is help people step back, even if it's just for an hour. Step back, figure out what it is you're really trying to achieve. Because I'll make up a completely arbitrary number, but I reckon between 30 and 40% of stuff that you do all day, every day is a complete waste of time. And it's helping people recognize that. But unfortunately, because you've got 150 emails to deal with, you just respond to it in the moment. And by the time you've got around to responding, the chances are the situation may have gone away or have changed. So it's giving people time and space to think.
Yeah, I agree. Having that focus time is essential for all of us. Even for me as a business owner, just to kind of have that time to step back and not necessarily just think about client work and stuff. It's very important to factor that in, because otherwise you do just get caught up with everything that's going on. And you don't feel like you're being productive.
No, look, I was lucky back in the day. It was late 2003, early 2004. I was very, very fortunate that Orange, who I was working for at the time, who are now EE, Orange sponsored me through INSEAD, which is a big global business school. And I had a month in Fontainebleau, just south of Paris, and a month in Singapore. And I remember one of the professors out there say, a guy called Jonathan Story, saying, truly great CEOs plan to be lazy. And I remember at the time thinking, whoop, whoop, that's me. I am going to be a fantastic CEO because that stuff comes really naturally. But what he went on to say was that at the time, and I think it was Bob Diamond was the chief exec at Barclays, and he had a rule that himself and his board had 1 hour a week that was sacrosanct. It was non-negotiable for anybody. And it's 1 hour a week. And let's say it was Wednesday, 11 till 12. And he and his board were completely uncontactable. So no phone calls, no emails, no computer screens, no meetings, nothing. You sit in your office, if you have one, you stare out the window, you've got a pen and a blank sheet of paper, and you spend that 1 hour every week just figuring out what the hell you're doing. And I've now, anybody who I engage with that has an issue with time, that's the advice I give them. Build that time into your calendar. that you never, ever give away, because you give it away once, it's toast. But spend 1 hour a week figuring out what you're doing, what you're not doing, what you should do more of, what you should do less of, and what you should stop. And boy, oh boy, the clarity it gives is quite astonishing.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's brilliant advice, and definitely something that we should all factor in, whether you are working for a company or working for yourself. Amazing. Thank you for that. So just talking a little bit more about your, the people who you support and your clients, how important is communication to ensuring that we are seen and heard, and how do you support your clients with this?
You've got to suggest that communication is at the absolute heart of everything we do as humans. It is essential. Without it, we're in a really difficult place. And it's, if you look at people who are not good at building relationships, a lot of the time it will be because they don't have great communication skills. They might not have been gifted them, or some people just have genuine issues with communication. The bottom line is, sorry, there's the dog. I promised you she wouldn't bark. Don't work with dogs and or animals and small children. But if you can still hear me, okay?
I can, yeah.
The whole thing about communication is it's communication builds relationships, and it's relationships that build teams, and it's teams that build businesses. So communication is at the absolute core of everything we do. And I guess the way I support people around communication is sort of indirectly, because what I attack, I guess, is dysfunction. What I attack is poor behavior. Because that's what we experience when we interact with other people. It's the relationship that we have or don't have with people that really matters. So I always struggle how to say this in a polite way, but I'll say it. I'll use the letters rather than the word. But the thing I attack is BS. Because it's just all too prevalent. And I think if people can build better relationships, they do it by communicating better. They communicate more freely if there's less BS. So in old marketing terms, people used to talk about the 5 Ps of marketing: product, price, positioning, placement, and promotion. And inadvertently, without having intended doing it, I've created what I refer to as the 5 Ps of nonsense. And they are politics, posturing, positioning, power plays, and point scoring. And if you can minimize those things in a business, if you can eradicate them, even better. But if you can minimize the amount of 5 Ps in your business, I absolutely, unequivocally guarantee you will have a better business. You will achieve more. And the 5 Ps of nonsense are all about BS. And that's why I call them nonsense. I would love to call them the 5 Ps of BS, but I'm not sure it gets through the censor that easily.
No, I mean, I 100% agree with you. And it's a conversation I was having with a client this morning, actually, about communication. It is at the very heart of everything that we do. And when you don't do it correctly, when you don't, control how you speak and how that communication lands on somebody, because that's what you're in control of, then we get ourselves in a whole load of mess.
We do, but again, maybe I think too well. I always try to see the good side in people, and that's maybe something that's I try to see the best, and it's something that's done it's done me a bit of harm every now and again, but not massively, nothing that I haven't been able to cope with. But I genuinely don't believe anybody wakes up in the morning and thinks, do you know what, today I'm going to be an absolute menace.
Exactly. Yeah.
But lots of people are just naturally very good at it. And a lot of time it's just because they're not aware.
Yeah.
They're not aware of the impact they're having on other people. They're not aware of how their tone of voice, their use of vocabulary, they don't see how it impacts other people. There are those people who don't care, frankly, how it impacts other people, because they're particularly self-righteous. You know, I don't imagine the inimitable Donald Trump has ever been greatly concerned about how other people see him.
Clearly not.
No. No, but actually, I do. I think he's terribly, terribly insecure, brutally insecure, and he gets very upset when people are mean and nasty to him. But you know, let's not go there because I could talk about him for a long time, and I wouldn't have any.
We'll be here for the rest of the day.
No, exactly. But I think just helping people become aware of the impact they have on other people, and there's that. It's the golden rule, which in Christianity is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's in every belief system, you know, throughout the world. Somebody, one of the rugby boys, said to me, their version of it is do unto others as they would have you do unto them, which I think is far, far nicer, because people, you know, I treat people the way I think they want me to treat them. Well, hang on a sec. I might not be right. You know, I might want to talk to somebody and somebody wants peace and quiet. So anyway, I'm going off tangentially.
So my version of that is treat other people as you would want to be treated if you was in their position.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just slight adjustment on that, but yeah, definitely one of the mantras I try my best to live by as well. So, you know, thinking about that and the challenges that communication does bring about, how do you manage difficult clients, and can you share an example of how you did this without naming names? Unless you want to name names, that is.
I don't think naming names would be a particularly smart thing to do. I think
No.
I think I ask lots of very open questions. You know, I'm not confrontational. You know, despite what a lot of people would imagine, you know, I'm pretty conflict avoidant. I don't need conflict in my life. You know, life is too short to deal with it. So I try to avoid situations or creating situations where conflict arises. What I try to do is get people to recognize stuff themselves. So I ask questions to help them arrive at the answer I want them to, a realization that their behavior is actually quite difficult and it's not conducive. So there are lots of ways of funneling people to the realization that they are being difficult and the impact they're having on people is negative. And, you know, it can take some time. You know, the one particular client, the chief exec, who is a genuinely lovely person, but does not realize that he's a domineering, bullying, aggressive micromanager. So it's a pretty toxic combination.
Yeah.
And, you know, if I'm really honest, I was getting to a point where he was beginning to realize the impact he was having in the business. And I told him 2 years ago that the biggest threat to his company was him.
Yeah.
And that didn't necessarily sit well. And you know, I continued working with them for about another year, but I've not had anything to do with them for a while now. And the reports coming out of the organization, because a couple of people still ring me, is that, you know, things are going south. And it's, you know, this guy doesn't do anything with malintent, but fundamentally what he lacks is he doesn't trust anybody in the organization.
Right.
Therefore, he has to do everything himself. And that gets in the way. So in terms of managing difficult clients, managing different people, I'm always honest. Even when it's slightly difficult, when it's uncomfortable, I'm always honest, because there is no point in telling somebody who's difficult what a great pleasure it is to work with them.
Yeah.
You know, people have to be aware of how they're perceived elsewhere, because otherwise I think you're doing them a disservice.
Yeah.
So yeah, honesty, sometimes brutal honesty, but framed in the right way, framed in a way that's non-confrontational.
Yeah.
Which isn't always easy.
No, I can imagine it isn't, but I love that. And it's something that we all have to you know, when you're running a business, you have to work out how to deal with that when you're working with clients directly. It's like, how do you manage their expectations? How do you manage making sure that they're doing what they need to do, without being confrontational? So that's brilliant. Thank you for that. So when you look at your industry and the trends and predictions, how important is EQ in comparison to the impact of AI that we are now seeing?
So EQ, emotional intelligence, remains at the core of humanity. You know, we're all made up of three constituent parts: our personality, our IQ, our intellect, and our EQ, our emotional intelligence. Personality and IQ are pretty much fixed in your late teens. They don't really radically vary. Emotional intelligence, in theory, evolves throughout your life. It's not always true, but generally people become more emotionally intelligent as they get older. Sometimes people link it to maturity, and it sort of is to some extent. So assuming that humans will still interact with humans, emotional intelligence will be at the absolute core of it, and learning the skills around emotional intelligence are critical. And you know, the interesting part, the key word in that is skills. Emotional intelligence skills. So it's like any other skill. You know, playing the piano, it's a skill. Playing the guitar, it's a skill. Anybody can learn to play the guitar. Anybody can learn to play the piano. Anybody can learn emotional intelligence. You've just got to want to do it. Some people are naturally good at it. So EQ is the core. I think AI is a, you know, potentially taking away a lot of the mundane tasks. You know, I'm not qualified to talk about AI, but you know, when I ask ChatGPT a complex question and it gives me a generally exceptional answer in under 2 seconds, I'm sort of flabbergasted. It's just brilliant. It's an enhancement to humanity, but it's not going to change. It's not going to help us build better relationships with people. It actually potentially makes it more difficult because we rely more and more on technology to solve our issues. Well, whose issues are you solving? Oh, yeah, humanities. And I'm a human. Therefore, I need to interact with other humans. So I think EQ, like, you know, I'm probably biased, but I think EQ, in terms of our relationships, is way more important than AI will ever be. But AI will change the world, no question.
Yeah, definitely is already doing that. Definitely. From your experience working with corporate businesses, what do you think will be the most powerful transformation they need to make in order to maintain their cultural reputation and credibility over the next 5 to 10 years?
I think this starts with actually figuring out what your cultural reputation is, what your cultural reputation truly is, not what you want it to be, not what you perceive it to be, but find out what your cultural reputation is. You know, so many organizations, you know, when they talk about culture, you know, I'm not 100% convinced they know what they mean. They might talk about, you know, mission, vision, and values. As you know, any large corporate will have mission, vision, values, and that's great. But I sort of go, well, yeah, so what? You know, what does that actually mean? What does that translate to? Because the way we experience culture is not through mission, vision, values. It's through behaviors. So if your values are correct, how do you measure them? So by way of example, if, you know, at some level, respect is in there as a value in most organizations. Well, how do we measure respect? So I'm going to say, Dion, I think in that team meeting, you were disrespectful to John. And you'll say, no, I wasn't. And I'll say, well, yes, you were. No, I wasn't. How was I? Well, you did this. I didn't say it like that. You know, it becomes very, very subjective. If, however, you take your values and translate them into specific behaviors, they become more measurable and therefore objective. So if we go back to respect, one of the things will be, you know, when somebody is presenting in a team meeting, everybody will have their phones face down and their computer screens shut unless they're taking notes.
Yeah.
That shows the person respect. If we're sat in a board or in a meeting and somebody presents something and we all sit and go, oh yeah, that's fantastic, nod, 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 and then go out into the corridor and have a corridor conversation and say how crap it was, that's disrespectful. So there are lots of things you can do where you're able to say, so, Dion, I think you were disrespectful in that meeting. Why? Because you were sitting doing your emails when that young guy was presenting and he was terrified. And I thought we'd agreed that we weren't going to do that. Actually, yeah, Stu, you're absolutely right. I wasn't paying attention. I nearly said my bad, but it's one of those phrases I absolutely despise. Yes, you're right. I shouldn't have done that. Or, after the meeting, somebody's bitching in the corridor and we say, hang on a second, why didn't you raise that in the meeting? So it's about helping people create a behavioral lived culture. It's how you work, not what you want it to be. It's what that adage about culture is what happens when the boss leaves the room. What is it actually that you're creating and want to create? So I think the first step in maintaining it is figure out what the hell it is. Then you have to create, just an honest dialogue around it, make it measurable, make it so that people know what they're experiencing and know what they're expected to do and how they're expected to behave. Sometimes you get brilliant people who just have great IQ but are slightly lower, great IQ, maybe a great personality but lower EQ, and it's making them aware of the impact they have on the culture. So the classic one I gave, let's say you're chief exec, you're recruiting for a senior position, you're recruiting somebody with a really strong personality, really gregarious, great charisma, with very high IQ, very, very bright, very smart, very quick of thought. They've got high self-regard, they've got high assertiveness, and they've got low empathy.
Yeah.
That person will absolutely smash every interview they ever do, because they're outgoing, they're bright, they're engaging, they're smart, they're quick-witted, brilliant. What you do when you bring that person bring into the organization is you have just recruited a bull in a china shop, and the chances are you will destroy your culture. So understanding the true package of what you're getting. So, how do you maintain your cultural reputation? Stamp out the bad behaviors and don't tolerate it. I don't know if I can use the exact words. Reed Hastings, who set up Netflix, has an expression that you can edit out if you need to. It's not too bad. But he said, get rid of the brilliant dickhead. The cost to teamwork is too high. And it is that simple. The moment you allow the slightest hint of toxicity into your business, you're in danger of losing the business.
Yeah.
Because when I see it happening and it's not stamped out, I'll let it go. Yeah. So there's a famous rugby team, the New Zealand All Blacks, the most successful sports team in history, any sport. And without going into their whole backstory, one of their expressions that they use, which isn't published anywhere, but when they get together as a team, as a squad, they create their own culture. They as a team, as players, decide what the culture is going to be for that squad. They set their own guidelines, and they have an expression to back it up. And the expression is, the standard that you walk past is the standard that you accept. And it's that simple. So, if I walk past Dion Smith and she's doing something that we said we weren't going to do, and I don't call her out, I'm letting her know that that's acceptable.
Right.
So it's a way of encouraging everybody to hold everybody else accountable.
Yeah.
And it's wonderfully elegant.
Very much so. Very much so. I really like that. Fantastic. Thank you for that. So let's talk a little bit about work-life balance because we all need some of that. How do you like to relax and have some you time? What does you time look like for Stuart?
So, I'm actually really content being on my own. I don't need lots of people around me constantly. I like a bit of silence, a bit of pause. Um, so I'm quite comfortable in my own space and my own skin. Uh, when I really want to relax, it might sound relax is maybe the wrong word, but me time is going out on a bike, either a road bike or a mountain bike, so pedal powered rather than a motorbike. And that's real catharsis for me because you're thinking about how do my legs feel? Can I breathe okay? Man, look at that vista. Look at the tree. Look at the sky. Look at so all the sort of negative thoughts get pushed aside, because you're looking to see where the pothole is in the road. And so it's very physical, but it's very physical mindfulness. It's a great way of spending time. And I go out with the same sort of group of guys, and they all sort of take the mickey out of me a little bit because at least once on every single ride we've ever been on, I will say something like, "Isn't this just fantastic? How lucky are we? What a great way to start the day?" And I just thoroughly enjoy it. I've started going to the gym again, new gym nearby, absolutely brilliant. Just again focusing on stuff that isn't about work. So, that's sort of the physical aspect of it. I love going walking. As you heard earlier on, I've got a little dog. Spending time out in the fields with her is great. But yeah, it's sort of, I don't mind a little trip down to the pub every now and again for a few pints of Guinness, and spending time at Leicester Tigers Rugby Club. So there's plenty going on.
Yeah. How often do you kind of take that time out? Is it every day? Is it, a few times a week?
Yeah, no, every day at some level. That's not always sort of necessarily going to the gym or going out on a bike ride. I try to go to the gym 2-3 times a week and go out for a bike ride, ideally 2-3 times a week, but the weather's been pretty lousy, so it might have been a couple of times during the week. So I try to do that, but the dog gets a walk every day, and I'm fortunate that I'm able to, choose my time and manage my time how I want to do it to an extent. So it's not a bad old life, as they say.
Definitely not. What free tips can you give our listeners on maintaining balance between work and personal pursuits?
I think the first thing is figure out just how important the two things are. If you're an absolutely dedicated careerist, you might assign more importance to work than to personal pursuits, but actually what you'll end up doing is burning out altogether too quickly. So I think the first tip would be recognize that work-life balance is a balance. It is about, taking time out. The adage I would sort of give, if you go to the gym and you pick up a dumbbell and you just keep it might be, it might be a 1 kilo dumbbell, neither here nor there. Try curling it 250 times. Eventually the smallest weight and you're toast, you're exhausted. That's the same with your brain. Think of your brain as a muscle. If you keep working it, keep working it, keep working it, keep working it, at some stage it's going to fail. And it's recognizing that downtime is utterly critical.
Yeah.
I think the next thing is figure out what really relaxes you. There are lots of great tools out there, lots of apps for meditation and breathing, and lots of things that perhaps you don't recognize as that having a value. They are incredibly valuable, and do them. And the third tip, go back to my story about Professor Jonathan's story, build some sacrosanct thinking time into your life, and do not give it up to anybody under any circumstance.
Yeah, 100%. I do make that time, but I haven't done it in a very like specific way, in the
Yeah.
sense of I haven't blocked it out in my calendar. This is my hour.
Yeah.
I'm going to do that after this call, 100%. So thinking about your personal and your professional brand, how has focusing on your personal brand helped you to make better connections and build stronger relationships with your audience?
This is one that I still have that dilemma with, Dion. I know you're all about personal brand, and it's still something I really struggle with. As I said earlier on, I'm just, I'm just me. I'm just little Stu Henry, Stuarty. People call me in Northern Ireland. People in England can't say Stuarty. They always put a D somewhere in it. But I am who I am. I don't have a business persona and a home persona. I've just, that's too complex for me. So I know I ought to spend more time on my personal brand. I know I ought to figure out what it is I bring to the table and talk openly and freely about it. I'm just quite crap at it. And whether it's false modesty, whether it's shyness, whatever it is, it's something I'm still learning to get better at. I think when other people join me on this journey, I'll be much more happy to talk about what we do. My personal brand is we, I suppose, and that's a complete anathema, I know, or an oxymoron. But my personal brand is all about honesty, integrity, vulnerability. Those are my attributes. Those are the things I do. When people ask, what is it you're good at? I've always struggled, genuinely always struggled. What are you good at? I used to say building relationships. That should be a given these days. What I now say is there are two things I would claim to be good at. One is storytelling. I think I'm a pretty good storyteller, and I help people write stories and build speeches and all the rest of it. The second thing I'm good at is asking stupid questions. Those are my two skills. That's my personal brand: storytelling and stupid questions. And I think just the whole honesty and integrity piece, that's what helps me build better relationships.
But, all of what you just said, as much as it's not something you're necessarily focusing on in a strategic brand building way, for me, part of your, having a personal brand is that you can just be authentically you. Yeah. You don't have to have that line between personal and professional in a very distinct way as such. You should be able to be yourself in either on either side. But it's just understanding that, like you said, what are my skills? What am I good at? What matters most to me? What are my values? How do I live by those? How do I make sure other people see that? Building that reputation and that credibility for those things that you are known for. That's what personal branding really is all about. And you're already doing that. I guess it's this kind of switching that mindset to understanding that that's what that is. How important do you think it is for employees though, as well?
Having just said what I've said, Dee, this is going to sound maybe a bit strange, but it's critical. As organizations become more disparate, as lots of the mundane stuff gets taken away by AI, helping people understand the value that you bring to an organization is going to be even more important than it has been previously. So, being anonymous in an organization is not going to work any longer. You have to be able to help people see your value, because they aren't going to come looking for it. So in bigger, faster moving organizations, having a clear personal brand is just critical. Otherwise, you just get ignored, you get forgotten about. So as you said, even if your brand is as simple as, this is what I'm good at, this is what I'm lousy at. Be honest about the second bit. Be even more honest about the second bit than the first bit, because people will see hopefully the first bit, but when you talk about the things that you struggle with, vulnerability. Vulnerability is a super strength. Everybody needs to learn to be comfortable with vulnerability. And there's an expression, I was going to try not to use it, but there's an expression that I picked up years ago that I adore, and it is, people who work hard to show their strength reveal their weakness. People who make no attempt to hide their weakness reveal their strength. Vulnerability is a super strength. We all make mistakes.
Exactly.
We all have self-doubt. We all get confused and frustrated and imposter syndrome. Everybody gets it at some level. Why hide it? Because the person you're talking to has it as well. So be honest, be open, be vulnerable, and your life will be a lot easier. I guarantee it.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. And I'm going to ask you one last bonus question, which you don't know about.
Okay.
Because I'm just like that.
Because you're kind.
It's not a difficult one, I promise. So BrandMe has BrandMe Faces, and Faces stands for I've forgotten what Faces stands for now. What's the F? The A is authentic.
Yeah.
The C is confident. The E is exceptional. The S is successful. And the F, going back to the beginning, and it's fearless. So when you think about yourself and you think about, how you aspire your personal brand to be, or how you see it now, which one of those words would you say fits you best?
Without hesitation, if I only had to choose one, it'd be authentic.
I thought you might say that.
Without hesitation. I think desperately honest. I remember having a difficult conversation with somebody a few years ago where I was in a bad place, and I remember talking to him about it, and this guy went, "God, will you stop being so honest?" And I remember thinking, "What? Are you kidding me?" But I am honest to a fault, and like maybe sometimes historically, certainly I might have been overly honest and been less subtle about it. I've got a bit older now, maybe a bit wiser, but I'm still terribly honest. Brutal truth, because it's what's fair. But delivered nicely, delivered kindly, with the right intention.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm going to give you one last quote, and it's from a really clever lady I used to work with, who she was HR director, group HR director, and she used an expression about manipulation with integrity. And I thought it was genius, because it's sort of where we ought to be. Sometimes you need to help people get to the right place, but if you do it with integrity, perfectly acceptable.
Yeah, exactly. Amazing. Thank you so much for everything that you've shared today. I'm sure that there's a lot of I know that there's a lot of information and tips in there that people are going to really benefit from. So thank you so much for being honest, living up to your personal brand persona, and authentic, and for everything that you shared. So I'm going to drop Stuart's contact information into the comments, and we'd love to hear your feedback. And if you have any questions, obviously you can reach out to myself or to Stuart. So thank you again for coming on the call today. And we'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.